In the late 19th century, one American family quietly built an empire so vast it controlled railroads, markets, and information itself. Their wealth rivaled nations. Their power shaped lives they never met. And then, almost without explanation, they vanished from the world they once ruled. In the early years of the 1880s, American newspapers began publishing figures that were difficult for the public to comprehend. Financial columns in the New York World, the New York Times, and regional railroad journals reported that a single family, guided by financier Jay Gould, exercised control over rail lines, telegraph wires, and corporate boards stretching from the Atlantic coast to the interior of the continent. According to 1880s financial estimates, Gould's holdings and influence reached levels unseen in the Republic's short history. While no single ledger captured the full scope, contemporary economists of the era described a concentration of power that, when adjusted even by 19th century standards, surpassed that of many European houses. Railroad mileage under Gould control alone was measured in the tens of thousands. Telegraph monopolies placed news, prices, and political intelligence under his indirect command. Archived editorials from the period reveal a growing unease. In 1881, papers spoke not of innovation, but of invisible control. Rural farmers complained of freight rates that shifted without explanation. Urban merchants recorded sudden price changes after private meetings of railroad directors. Laborers, appearing only as numbers in census schedules, vanished from employment rolls after strikes were broken and lines consolidated. Court records from New York and Missouri show repeated legal disputes involving Gould-controlled companies, stock manipulation suits, injunctions against labor action, and contested mergers. Yet judgments were delayed, overturned, or quietly settled. The pattern, noted even at the time, suggested something deeper than individual corruption. The disturbing realization, emerging gradually through printed columns and whispered testimony, was not merely that Gould was wealthy. It was that his empire operated beyond the reach of customary restraint. Institutions that once checked private power appeared hesitant, divided, or ineffective. By the mid-1880s, Gould himself rarely appeared in public. Contemporary accounts describe a thin, guarded figure moving between offices and private railcars. Decisions affecting thousands were made behind closed doors, recorded only in corporate minutes and stock ledgers later examined by historians. The discovery was not sudden. It unfolded slowly as Americans came to understand that an unseen architecture of control had been built around them: steel rails, copper wires, legal charters, all converging toward a single financial center. And yet, within less than a decade, this immense structure would begin to dissolve. What remained in the records was not triumph, but absence. The United States of the 1880s was a nation transformed by iron and speed. Railroads defined geography, compressing distance and reshaping labor. According to census data from 1880, urban populations surged as rural Americans and immigrants sought wages along rail lines and in factories. The social order was rigid. At the top stood industrial financiers, often absent from daily operations, yet omnipresent in consequence. Beneath them were managers, clerks, and engineers, recorded in employment rosters and city directories. At the base were laborers, whose lives appeared in census columns as age, occupation, and birthplace, then vanished again. Railroads were not merely transportation. They were systems of control. Freight rates determined whether farms survived. Timetables dictated factory output. Telegraph networks, many under Gould influence, transmitted market prices and political intelligence faster than any human messenger. Newspapers of the era described America as prosperous, yet municipal health reports tell a harsher story: overcrowded tenements, industrial injuries, and outbreaks of illness. In cities like New York and St. Louis, mortality registers list deaths linked to exhaustion, exposure, and workplace accidents. The Gould Empire thrived within this imbalance. Jay Gould, born in modest circumstances, navigated a world where corporate law favored consolidation. State legislatures, eager for rail expansion, granted charters with minimal oversight. Courts struggled to interpret laws never designed for enterprises of such scale. By the 1880s, public resentment grew. Labor movements, documented in police logs and newspaper reports, attempted organization. Strikes were met with injunctions, militia presence, and dismissals. The records show that rail companies linked to Gould were frequently involved in these disputes. Yet the social order held. Power remained concentrated, justified by arguments of progress and national growth. The cost was borne quietly by those whose names appear only briefly in ledgers and burial registers. At the center stood Jay Gould, whose name appears repeatedly in court filings, stock reports, and financial commentary. Unlike other magnates, Gould avoided public philanthropy and political office. His influence operated indirectly through boards and trusts. Records identify associates, railroad executives, lawyers, and financiers whose careers rose and fell alongside his. These individuals are traceable through corporate minutes and legal correspondence, though their public profiles remained limited. Escalation came through consolidation. Rail lines were absorbed, reorganized, and leveraged. Telegraph companies merged, placing information flow under fewer hands. Contemporary critics accused Gould of manipulation, citing sudden stock movements following private transactions. The escalation was not violent, but systemic. Court cases filed by competitors and labor groups rarely succeeded. Judges cited jurisdictional limits or contractual complexity. The pattern suggests an environment where power outpaced regulation. By the late 1880s, investigative journalists attempted scrutiny. Articles questioned rate practices and stock pools, yet many inquiries stalled. Advertising revenue and political pressure limited exposure. Government reports acknowledged monopolistic tendencies, but proposed little action. The Interstate Commerce Act of 1887 emerged too late to dismantle existing power structures. Medical records from the period indicate rising illness among industrial workers, while wealth accumulated elsewhere. Silence, rather than scandal, defined the end of the decade. Jay Gould died in 1892, just beyond the 1880s horizon. Even before his death, the empire began to fragment. Records show reorganization, sales, and decline. By the end of the century, the Gould name no longer dominated headlines. Railroads passed into new hands. Telegraph systems diversified. What once appeared permanent proved temporary. The legacy remains unsettling. The records of the 1880s reveal how power can rise quietly, operate invisibly, and dissolve without resolution. The lives affected appear only in fragments, census lines, court dockets, burial entries. History remembers the Gould Empire not for its disappearance, but for what its absence reveals, that even the largest structures can vanish, leaving only paper behind.